Hi Flosstube, it's Arlene here. It's Friday, January 18th, and I'm here for my first Flosstube of 2019. It's been a few weeks. There's been some hard parts of the last few weeks, but let's just not focus on that in terms of life updates. Let's just move forward in where we are here. I have so much stuff in front of me and I feel like exhausted in preparing for today's video because I just kept trying to think about the various things that I wanted to share with you because I have some big things to share. So let's see if I forgot anything as I'm going forward. I really wanted to get this video in before I lost all daylight, and it's been a great day here. There was a small storm that came in overnight. It was like a inch of snow that kind of is mostly melted away, but there's a bigger storm coming in over the weekend. But it's very gray out, so the light that I do have isn't the best. But I wanted so much to get this video out tonight, that I'm just gonna plow forward and do it. If you follow me on Instagram or on or in Stitch Mania on Facebook, you might have seen something that is pretty big news to me. And so I'm just gonna move forward and jump right into that. I've got a big finish, ladies and gentlemen. The piece that I've shared with you over the last number of Flosstubes that I started working on back in July, which is the piece I designed called Gossamer Lace and Blackwork. It's finished. I finished it 2 nights ago, Wednesday night, and there she is. And it's hard to even like get it all on the screen. Let me need to kind of do the stand-up thing. So it is 18 inches in diameter. I'll do some close-up time, and it is on 40 count linen from Silk Weaver in a color that's called Deep Denim. I used DMC B5200, you know, the bright white, using 1 strand over 2, and I used almost 5 skeins. I mean, there's some left of that 5th skein, but not a whole lot. And I truly loved working on this. I've shared before that most of my life have been a 1 project at a time stitcher. And I basically choose projects that I just love. It doesn't mean there's sometimes not, there's some overlap, and this one I shared in my last video that I had to take a few weeks away because I was doing some model stitching for pieces that were sent off to Just Cross Stitch magazine, but for the most part, other than that, a few weeks away, various trips that I couldn't take it on because it was so large. This has been what I've been stitching on this whole time. And just to show you, this is an 18-inch ruler, and this is hard to do, but from there to there, just about 18 inches. So I am just thrilled to have it completed. I love the way it looks. The blue on white, this shade of blue on white is just what I wanted. It's on my list for this weekend to be updating this pattern, or to be updating the look of it. The front of it, I'm going to replace this computer-generated image with a picture of my finished. I had put on the back, this is where I was when I released it, and this circle wasn't even finished. But it felt like it was important enough to put some sort of vision of what it will look like on the pattern. But I will now replace this picture with what it can look like stitched up. With my patterns, the ones that I've models, I have over time replaced the actual model picture with the computer generated one. I know some stitchers that really sells them on a pattern, and for others they can envision what it might look like on their own. It's, it is what it is, but certainly when you have something like this, you want to appreciate it. It is my plan to get it framed, to bring it to get it professionally framed. Not the most immediate task, partially because I want to be able to roll it up and bring it a few places first. I haven't, I don't think it's come up. I will be attending StitchCon again this year, and they have graciously asked if I would have a Works by ABC trunk show. So it'll definitely be framed by the end of June, so it will be at StitchCon framed as part of the Works by ABC trunk show. I just also hope that people can see that it's the kind of design that you could do parts of. You could just do the center part there, and that alone is, I think, a beautiful standalone design. In terms of framing, I'd be open to any thoughts you might have. I can't picture it with a white frame. I feel like the white frame would not necessarily, would sort of come across as almost too bright or kind of take away from the stitching. I know there's websites where you can like upload a picture and then put a frame around, and I will probably play around with that kind of stuff. I mean, there's a side of me that wonders, just like a classic wooden frame, maybe medium color, something that just doesn't, that's just classic. But I don't know. Again, I just feel like a white frame wouldn't do this justice. But if I'd be open to any thoughts you have, and like I said, it's not my it's not like I'm going to the framers tomorrow. So I'm gonna have some time to kind of contemplate and decide what direction I'll go before I go, and then, as I usually do, spend a ridiculous amount of time contemplating between A, B, C, D, or E. But hopefully they have patience with me. So, major finish, which I am really pleased about. So as I think I'm going to be putting in the title, a big finish. And if you have watched other Flosstube videos of mine, you probably, before you even started hitting play, can suspect what my big finish was. But this is not the only big thing of this video, and the reason why there was lots of prep, all surrounding me for this video. So the other big thing that I've just been so intensely working on is that I have new patterns to share with all of you today, and I am so excited to do so. My new patterns all have stories to go with them, and so even if you're not in the market to buy anything or start anything new, I hope you might be interested in hearing some stories. So I have 5 new patterns. They're all cross-stitched this time around. I realized I love doing canvas work pieces. I actually have one that it's sort of in the works. Parts of it are graphed out. I started some stitching on it. I had to let it go for this next round of release because I knew how much I wanted to finish my gossamer lace piece. And I had no desire to be stitching on that canvas work piece. And the canvas work pieces, the patterns that I've put out, I have to stitch the models because I am literally designing as I'm stitching, and I need to write out the instructions and take pictures as I go, and I just wasn't in that state. And it was right around, I guess, Thanksgiving time, and I was working on the just cross-stitch models, and I just realized that if I could let go of the idea that I don't have to put out a canvas work pattern in every set of patterns, that it would feel a little bit easier. So I know one of the things that I'll be working on next is this canvas work pattern that's already started. And when that one is ready to share with you, there's I think a really good story to go with it. But just know that that is in the works. Today there are 5 cross-stitch patterns to share. So I'm going to start with one that actually is a little trip down memory lane, depending on how long you've been here with me on Flosstube. So a little trip down memory lane. I meant to look up which Flosstube it was, probably one of my earlier ones. But it doesn't matter, I'm going to re-show it anyway. I shared with you a project that I did a few years ago where I have 4 framed pieces hanging on my wall, although my wall is empty right now because I took them down to share with you. I created, bobbin lace is one of my other passions besides needlework. If you are new to me or relatively new, I think my last couple of videos I've been talking about lace. Anyway, this is a piece of bobbin lace that I did. I did not design it. I had found the pattern, loved the pattern, knew that I wanted to create it. I wanted to do it, but also in the immediacy of seeing this pattern, also knew I want to do something else with it, that the geometry of it so appealed to me, that the paths, I'm getting the light reflection going on here, the paths that go around that square, the way they weave over and under one another, it was just so appealing to me. And that I wanted to try interpreting it in different ways of needlework. And so I did. And what, there's stuff on the back of it, and what I've shared, too much stuff all around me, people, is that I did 4 different versions of it. So here's my black work piece, which is done on white fabric with black thread, sort of in a very traditional black work way. I also did a pulled thread version, which is gray on gray, a light gray fabric with light gray matching thread. There was a original plan that this was going to all be hardanger. You could see the hardanger work in the center, and I'll talk a minute about how the plans changed, but you can see what I ended up doing was pulled thread work for most of the stitching that went on in there. And then the next one, or whatever order these ended up going in, I refer to as a canvas work piece. It is on 24 count Congress cloth, which is to say smaller than 18 count canvas work, and the canvas, excuse me, and the stitches, trying to get as close as I can, are the types of stitches you might find in canvas work. And this is on white Congress cloth with a dark gray. So you could see that the theme I had going, and in the way I had them all framed, they have the same frame, different mats, that they were all, I've adjusted myself here, this black and white and gray theme. Now, in addition to the bobbin lace, there are 3 others. I think in my mind at the time, I had this vision of a total of 5 others. There was this idea for a beaded one. And I know that because I have a whole collection of white beads. I was going to do a dark gray fabric with white beads, and it never came to pass. And I'm pretty sure that at the time I was thinking I would do a cross-stitch one. And I'm pretty sure, well, there were a couple reasons why those last 2 didn't happen. I know the bead one, I got frustrated in the playing around with the testing out things, and I couldn't get beads to work the way I want to, and the solid and the size fabric, and in the cross stitch one, well, I ran out of challenge to it. Like, I'd already worked out the challenge of the math of reproducing the lace in a 32 count way, and actually also in a 24 count way, and it wasn't interesting anymore, and there were other projects to work on, and so I decided the 3 that I created were enough. But ever since I've been designing and sort of keeping in all various places, mostly now in one little notebook, a running list of ideas, it has always been on my list to come back to create a cross-stitch version, because I think there is appeal to this. Now I'm holding up the blackwork version here. There is appeal for those who like geometric cross-stitch, which, you know, everyone has the things they like. This overall design, I think, has some interesting appeal, and you could do some interesting things with the colors of it. So I thought once it finally came that this design was going to be one of the patterns that I would do for this round, it would kind of be a no-brainer in that I would go into the file, which you can't see, but on the lower shelf, like below this shelf, there are like magazine file things, and one of them is about halfway filled with various graph paper of all kinds of projects. I mean, go way, way back to the first times that I just graphed out somebody's name to put in, let's say, a wedding sampler or baby things, all the way to like things that I've designed on my own, which up until a couple years ago has always been on graph paper. I thought it was going to be as simple as going into that file and just finding the graph paper. And I couldn't. I could not find the charts. And I know I would not have thrown them away because I have all the other stuff in there. I would not have thrown them away. Drove me crazy. I'm sure we all have stories like this of things you know are not thrown away. You know they have a place where they should be, and they're not in that place. Well, I took the black work off the wall and I charted from my actual stitching. I ran into some interesting math issues. I'll come to that in a second. But wouldn't you know it, that after I was done with the majority, the math, the charting of the basic project, yeah, I found all the materials that I had used and created. Yeah. So off screen over there, or a long time ago I showed you, this place is such a mess. I'm not going to pan over there right now, but I have these shelves with these containers. I was in the containers looking for something totally different, specifically about a week ago, and I couldn't believe it. But yeah, right in there I found, here were the leftover threads. Here's the leftover light gray threads. Here are scraps of various things I was trying. Some other threads. Here are my experiments with the hardanger that, this way. The experiments with hardanger that I couldn't get the math to work. Like I could do the stitches, but not using the number of threads that I had available to me within the math of it. Here's my Congress, this is Congress cloth, which is to say it's stiff, but not as stiff as canvas. And here is me playing around with all kinds of stitches and trying to choose which ones I would eventually use for the design. Yeah, here's the graph paper. Here's how this does. I mean, I just did a quarter and could work off the quarter. You know, you could see this, and then one of these is the 24 count. One of these is, I've got parts like this. Here, oh, that's the original lace. It would have been really nice. Oh, look, I even marked this one, canvas work. It would have been great had I had this whole pile of my graph. Here's my notes. Oh, here, this is the black work one. Look, with sticky notes attached, things I should try out. Yep, here's where I was trying to make the black work patterns work in the space. Look at this. Yeah, this would have been really valuable, but that's okay. I had my actual stitching, and I worked from that. And at least I proved to myself that no, I had not thrown away any of this. It just wasn't where I thought it was. That's all. So, long story long there, the first pattern I'm putting out now, I'm calling Woven Geometry. And I'm hoping you can see, well, here is the original lace. Oops. This would be a cross-stitch version. You can see it's inspired by. It's not intended to be an identical recreation because you can't recreate bobbin lace in cross-stitch. Like, it just, the threads don't work the same way. Now, for a main image here, my brain is still stuck in the black, white, gray theme that I had going. And since the time I did this a few years ago, something that has come out include the new DMC threads. So what I have put down as a possible, and I repeat, possible, thread color option. These are some of the new DMC threads. And here's a dark gray fabric. In fact, This fabric might have been something I got at the time I was considering that. This might have been the fabric that I was considering doing the beaded version on. It's a dark gray that I would have put the white beads on. I don't know. It would explain why it's in, but it's not big enough. That's the odd thing, unless I used part of it and cut it. But if I were doing this cross stitch right now and had access to the same frames and the same mats and literally wanted to make another one on my wall, I would probably be doing it with these. And these are of the new DMCs, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 27. However, you may not be in a black, white, gray kind of theme. And you can also see I've included what you could help visualize what this might look like. This is just picking the color purple, a monochrome with purples, multiple. And here is a version using 4 colors. What I've included in this pattern is a couple notes on how to play around with the colors, like if you follow the paths, and also a little bit about the stitching, particularly when you hit the end of a path. I will say, unlike many of my cross-stitch patterns, which are mostly full crosses, this one does include 3/4 crosses, and it's a pretty significant part of the design. So if it's something that you don't mind doing or like having to just do something different, just note that this is a design that has 3/4 stitches and a lot of them. I offer all my patterns in my Etsy store as both paper patterns that I could mail to you or as PDF downloads, and I'll put all the links below for direct links to the Etsy listings for these patterns. And again, if you are new, I am Works by ABC on Etsy. I am hoping soon these will be also in Hoffman's hands, that they can also be through to your LNS. But for this moment, or for at least certainly this release of patterns, I like the idea of being faithful to my Flosstube people. You are my people. You've been my people since I first started doing designs. And I just like you all getting to see them first. So let me leave that at that. So there you go. My first one for today is showing you what I'm calling woven geometry. Full crosses and 3/4 crosses. 3/4 stitches are in here. And as with all my designs, I just encourage people to do colors that they like. You're not limited by any designers what they have put out. The next one to share with you, I need to take you back to this past summer when I shared with you this design, Margaritas flower jugs. And the new design today is a companion piece called Margaritas flower basket. So both of these come from a pattern book that was originally published in 1725. And while I love finding these old pattern books, which are inevitably black and white, and it's me coming up with colors, what I really loved about this book, as I shared back in the summer, is that this one was published, the author is a woman. And while there may have been women involved in some pattern books back then, the idea that a woman's name was actually attached to it, she was actually given credit for it, is pretty rare. So Margaretha Helm was an artist working in Nuremberg, Germany. Like others of her time, she did lots of things, painted, engravings, designed, needlework. And there are volumes of her books that you can find. Some of her designs just so lend themselves to what could be created nowadays. Just to share with you this design, if you are familiar with Saho, she is a floss tuber in Japan. She is currently stitching the Margaretha's flower jugs, and she posted, this is from her, well, let me just try and focus in on this picture of it. Nope, turn the other way. She posted it sideways and I can't get it. She was posting a before and after from Jessie Marie's Whip Parade, how much she had gotten stitched while watching Jessie Marie. So she is stitching it using the actual colors as I've charted them. And I think it's looking so beautiful. I so love, Saho has stitched a number of my designs. She is Saho Dream Stitch on Instagram and Flosstube. I know Saho Dream Stitch definitely on Instagram, and I think she has it also on Flosstube, like that. So anyway, this would definitely be considered a companion piece, only because I've envisioned you could do it in the same colors, but you don't have to. So, Margaretha's flower basket, and I've also provided some information about Margaretha in the back, and I just think women need to be celebrated literally from 300 years later, for 300 years later. So there you go. Second pattern for today. The next one to share with you, I'm sometimes I get a little confused now that I have been writing blog posts, and if you are been following me, thank you, and please do. You can get my blog posts like emailed directly to you, so you don't have to like check my website to see if there's a new blog post. I know I wrote about this on my blog, and I'm trying to remember, did I talk about it on a Flosstube? That's where I was going with this. So I don't know. So I'm not sure. I remember talking about this book at some point on a Flosstube. I think I did. Let's just go with it. Let's just go with the idea that I did talk about this book on a Flosstube. And I, in particular, was sharing with you. Now, of course, this is one of the things I meant to do before I started. And here's one of the first things I forgot to do. Okay, but in the grand scheme, it's not the worst. Here we go, I can find it. I believe I shared with you how when I encountered this in this book, it reminded me of something else. And I went to this book, this page I already had picked out. They are not the same, they are different. These are two what are called bed rugs, not to be confused with a rug that you put on the floor. Bed rugs was a term that was used back in the 1700s that was, just like a heavy bed covering. These two were made by sisters. And the one in this book is in the Connecticut Historical Society. I saw this exhibit, Connecticut Needlework, Women, Art, and Family, 1740 to 1840. I think it was 2011 or something like that. The one in this book is at Winterthur, and I have seen it at an exhibit. A few years back, it was out in an exhibit. You could see they have the same color palette. There's similarities, but there's also some significant differences. There's actually a third one and even a fourth one. The whole story behind it is so fascinating to me, and I think the color scheme so beautiful that I think it needed to be immortalized in cross-stitch. So this is working off the one, or this one is inspired by the one from the Connecticut Historical Society. So that one is made by Elizabeth. The one at Winterthur is made by her sister Mary. Elizabeth Foot's Flowers. Not a large design, 108 by 123. What I've also done, as I so enjoy doing in my patterns, is including the backstory. So I share with you here the backstory of the 3 bed rugs that are in museum collections. So from the Connecticut Historical Society, from Winterthur, and the third one is at Historic Deerfield in Massachusetts. Now what's so interesting about them is the one at Deerfield, in many sources, is actually misattributed. It is many places you see it listed as being Abigail Foot, like the 3 sisters, Elizabeth, Mary, and Abigail Foot. There is a scholar, a textile historian, who did significant research and believes, and seems to me correct, that this one is not done by Abigail, but instead by a woman named Sarah Otis. Now, who's Sarah Otis? Well, it turns out that Elizabeth Foote, Mary Foote, Sarah Otis, and Sarah Otis's sister, Hannah Otis. The four of them all got married on the same day. Sarah Otis married one of the Foote brothers, so his name was Israel Foote, and Mary Foote married one of the Otis brothers. His name was Nathaniel Otis. Hannah Otis married some random guy, and Elizabeth Foote married some random guy. But there was a quadruple wedding that happened on November 5th, 1778. And it is believed that the two Foote sisters and the two Otis sisters created these 4 bed rugs they have the same color palette, the same style, but there's distinct differences between them. And it's believed that the 2 sets of sisters, the 4 of them, created these bed rugs in preparation for their wedding. The 4th one, that there's no picture here, I've only seen one picture of it in a place that I did not feel comfortable copying the picture here. It's believed to be in private hands. The only place I saw it was because it was part of an auction a good 10 years ago at this point. So in an auction that probably went into private hands. And that's the one that is believed to be Hannah Otis's. So I think the story is amazing. I think they're beautiful. There's a side of me that wants to do something with Mary's, the flowers in Mary's. And I mean, they're stylistic flowers. We're not talking realistic flowers by any means. I've picked up DMC colors that pretty much match. Again, you can use anything you want. So Elizabeth Foote's flowers is am I up to 4 now? Nope, that's the 3rd of the patterns that I'm sharing with you today. Trying to move things to the floor as I'm done with them, just to get them out of my way. Okay, the 4th one, I know probably when I was in high school, but definitely when I was in college, I, like maybe a lot of people, like to collect quotes, write them in a quote book. I shared with you at one point a quote blanket, which actually I never used as a blanket. I made it a wall hanging that I cross-stitched, and that I don't have it out or hanging right now, but it's something that meant a lot to me at that time, taking some of those quotes and making them more permanent in that way. And I love patterns that have a statement that say something important. And so it's been on my mind that maybe I need to do some of those. I'm not saying every pattern I create will have a quote on it, but maybe a few of them. I've done a couple, and maybe I have a few others in my mind. And so here's a quote that just seemed really important, especially in this last little bit of time in my life. What lies behind us and what lies before us are small matters compared to what lies within us. That quote is often attributed to Ralph Waldo Emerson. If you Google it, you will find lots of references to being Emerson. You will find lots of famous people. I mean, the biggest name was Oprah, but lots of people quoting it as an Emerson quote. And yet, if you keep reading, you discover that, well, but there's no place that anyone can find that Emerson actually said it. What there does seem to be evidence, so I've written this. So here's the pattern that I've created. And in all honesty, this pattern started with the border. I found a lacy scroll border that's actually filet lace, and I just wanted to adapt it in some way. And I thought, this is going to be a perfect one to do something with a quote with. And I went to my place of quotes and I said, yeah, we're going to start with this one. And I admit, I was calling it the Emerson quote until I started just checking my facts. And the facts seem to be that the first evidence of it being published anywhere is from 1940. And that's well after Emerson died. In a small book about economics. It was about Wall Street. And it was originally published without an author, but then in 1947, it was 7 years later, it was tracked down. Who the author was a man by the name of Henry Haskins, who really is a nobody. And there's some theories about how it became attached to Emerson's name, and it's also been attached to Henry Thoreau. It's been attached to a few others. The whole theory of when you have a good quote, it has to be attached to a famous person, whatever. So I didn't put Emerson here because that's what the reason I went to research it was just to confirm Emerson before I, put Emerson, and I decided not to. So I had a couple things in mind when I started this. I really wanted to chart that border out in a way that would just work. Now, I also admit I wanted to create a design that would fit really nicely into a typical sized frame. And, well, I kind of did it. Here's what happened. If you stitch this on 36 count or 18 count or 36 count over 2, it would fit really nicely. So with all my patterns, I always do this, which is to show you the finished size. Like, not only do I give you the stitch count, but I give you, like, I do some math for you. And you could see what happened. Like, I just couldn't do it great for 32 count. For 32 count, it is literally 8 inches by 10 inches, which is to say you wouldn't put it in an 8 by 10 frame. It just wouldn't. You'd cut off the edges. If you stitch it on 36 count, which would be 7.1 by 8.8, you get an 8 by 10 frame, and you have a nice little ½ inch around, and that would be like perfect. So, you could play around and think about it for yourself. What you'll see on all my Etsy listings is that I always give you this information on the Etsy listings, so you can see what the math comes out to be. If, as far as I'm concerned, if you like to stitch on 40 count, or if you like to stitch on other counts, you are probably able to do the math for yourself. I just picked the most common ones that I include on my patterns. I love the border of this, and I will go ahead and say you could stitch the border and probably do something else in the center if the quote doesn't work for you. I included a butterfly because of the symbolism of butterflies in the world. These little winged creatures are deep and powerful representations of life. Around the world, people view the butterfly as representing endurance, change, hope, and life. So there you go. What lies within us is the name of this pattern. Alrighty. Maybe we could say I'm leaving the best for last. I don't know. I don't really want to play favorites, but this one's a good one, people. So, and I want to tell you a little bit of the backstory. And we need to go back to October, when I'm at the library and they have a display of like Halloween-y themed books out, more than just Halloween, but like related things. And I see this book, Death, a Graveside Companion. Okay, little side note. I've often talked about how much I love libraries. I love my library. I try to use all the resources and everything. I'm lucky to be a part of 2 different library systems. The library system I use the most allows you to take out a book for 3 weeks and then renew it a total of 4 times, which means if no one else wants it, you can keep it for a total of 12 weeks, which is why this story starts in October and I'm filming in January and I still have this book. Okay, so I saw this book and I'm aware. I try to be attentive to some of the trends that are out there in the cross-stitch world. And one of them is about dark stitching and how that is appealing to a lot of stitchers, certainly that are doing Flosstube. And it's in my little notebook of ideas. And there have been a few over my 1.5 years or so or longer of designing. And I, tried to play around with a few ideas. And anyway, so I picked up this book and I saw all the graphic pictures and things. Some of them are like historical pictures, background information, all kinds of stuff going on in here. And I was like, I bet I could get some ideas from this book. And there's actually 2 ideas that came from it. One of it hasn't come to fruition, and I'm going to say yet. There might be something coming in the future. But one thing that did come from this had me doing some research on gravestones. And that led me to finding one that just seemed so appealing. And I need to give a huge shout out to a wonderful group of stitchy friends here that have been so supportive and helpful to me, because I had actually shared the image with them and said to them, have you guys ever seen this in cross stitch before? Because it is a worry. There have been 2 distinct times that I've had ideas of a cross stitch pattern, and then I've gone on to discover that it's more or less already been done. Like a very clear-cut, concrete idea. So knowing that, I just wanted to check in with more people. And from that came a lot of enthusiasm and excitement for this project. And I so appreciate that. You all know who you are. Thank you so much. And so there's more to this. Where this has led is this pattern called The Death of Susanna Jane, a headstone reproduction. Now, Susanna Jane died in 1776, August 1776, just, put in perspective, a month after the signing of the Declaration of Independence. Her headstone, she is buried in Massachusetts. This is a picture of her actual headstone. It has a very unusual shape at the top. It has a significant amount of symbolism. I did a lot of reading on gravestone symbolism, and there's all kinds of things that are often included. What's rare is how many of them are included in this top part here. How many words. There's actually 2 distinct parts. There's sort of the typical epitaph right here, but then there's an additional poem. There's a lot to her gravestone. And it just became something that I realized would be, I think, so appealing to those who like to stitch skeletons and things like this. Now, where I went with this was, after charting things out, sort of thinking, well, what kind of colors? What would be good to create for for an image? And I asked some friends for their opinions, and what ended up happening, like just in a spontaneous kind of way, more than just their opinions, a few of them actually started stitching it. So if you have been watching some Flosstubes recently, where some people have been talking about a secret stitch, some of them might have been talking about this. So you can go back and watch. If you look at Michelle Bendy, she started this. And I meant to double check, but I'm pretty sure it was number 50 in her whip parade. If you look closely, you might notice, I think she's the center starter. So she started she didn't put any words, but she's got like the center curved line there. If you look at Trisha, 3 Owl Threads, she showed in her last video a start of this. Diana, It Is Kismet. Again, I should have gone back and double checked. She referred to a mystery project. She was talking about the bag it was in. I happened to notice the little edges, and she's also shared some pictures with me, so I knew about the fabric she was using. So I was pretty sure, yeah, that's Susanna Jane in that bag. I'm pretty sure in her video she didn't actually show her start of it. And then there is McKenna, Stitching in Sequins, who, in her last video, you saw her start of it, and it was another one she referred to as a mysterious start. But in the last few days has been going gung-ho on it. So what I have shown here and what I've listed on the back are suggestions. Because when I asked a group of friends, how would you do this? How would you stitch this? Theoretically. Almost everyone was picking out like over-dyed threads. It's a gravestone. What's your vision of that? So I've picked out some over-dyed threads. You will see, I know Michelle has already decided, and hers are definitely, there's some distinct differences. I know Trisha and Diana are a little bit more figuring out as they go. What McKenna's doing is stitching what's here. So she sent me a picture from just her update from last night, hold on. And this is showing you the top of Susanna Jane. So, for example, one of the symbolism pieces in Susanna Jane's gravestone is this snake that is eating its tail. And it is called an oribus. I'm not pronouncing that correctly. A snake eating its tail. There are angel cherubs that represent heaven. Down below, there's bats that represent the underworld. Now, it was also, and then, just for funsies' sake, she sent me a picture this morning with a little bit more of an update with, of course, her cat supervisor. So there's Erwin supervising, making sure that every X is crossed correctly. And she's got a little bit more of the sun done this morning. So that just gives you a sense of one possible color option. These are the colors that you will see charted. Does not in any way mean that you have to use those. There's like a purplish overtone to some of the grays and purples, we'll say. But you do you. So I'm going to actually, I meant to say this ahead of time, hashtag Susanna Jane would be a lot of fun because like I said, I already know 4 people that are stitching it, and maybe some more of you will be joining in. Now, a couple other things about the pattern. I wanted, because this is a big one, you will see if you were to look at the information that here we go, on the Etsy listing. It became apparent as I was trying to work this out, I basically had to start with the words and kind of work backwards because it was going to be big. But I also wanted to make sure it basically boiled down to fitting on a fat quarter. So if you're doing this on a 14 count, it depends how much your fat quarter, what size fat quarter you really have. But on a 16 count or 32 count over 2, it's basically pretty fat quarter friendly, and definitely on a 36 or higher. So, take a look at what you see here. But that became important, that it didn't get so big, because there were so many words to make sure I was getting in. And yet at the same time to not make it some really odd size that would require you to get a special cut or a fat half of fabric. Now, because of that, to get in this bottom poem, I've given you 2 options. To fit it in, I had to do it in back stitch, but I also am aware there's some people that don't like back stitch. So then came the suggestion, what if you stitch it, or what if you do it as 1/1 stitching? So I'm actually giving you charts for both options. So you have the chart to back stitch it. You also have the chart to 1/1 stitch it, which I know on this kind of picture, it's hard to tell the difference, but it's for whatever is more comfortable for you for stitching. You have both options available to you. They fit, the border is the same border. The words will fit in the same place. So you have those options. And then there was one other thing I was going to say about this. Oh, hashtag Susanna Jane. When I looked that up, it is a few pictures of people posting the actual tombs, the actual gravestone. There's one person who has a tattoo of the gravestone, but I think it would be kind of fun if we add on some stitching pictures of it. So please join in if you are into this kind of stuff. I think it's a great pattern for those who like this type of stitching and thinking about this kind of stuff. There are some pretty cool headstones out there that perhaps might be cross-stitch patterns in the future. And Susanna Jane, who was clearly loved by her husband, if you read this, this is a tribute to her. There you go. So that's the 5th of my 5 patterns. So just quick review: Woven Geometry, Margaritas Flower Basket, Elizabeth Foot's Flowers, What Lies Within Us, and The Death of Susanna Jane, a Headstone Reproduction. All listed below. I have direct links to both the paper copies and the PDF versions on my Etsy store, and hopefully soon through Hoffman you can get through your local store as well. Whoa, that was longer than I thought it was going to be. Before I move on to the other things on my list, I have, as always, put in here, whenever I've released patterns, I like to give away patterns. So I'm going to pick 3 winners of people. A few videos ago, I said if you want to win a pattern, put your initials in that particular video. You can pick one of these patterns. You could pick one of my other patterns. It doesn't make a difference to me. PDF, paper copy, I'll do it any way you want. It's just my way of offering. And just to be clear, yes, I know how to use the random number generator. My attitude is the time it takes me to cut and paste names and put that in and do all of that, I think it's actually quicker to handwrite the names on a piece of paper and cut them up. And it just adds to the tactile doing something, because we're all stitchers. We want to do things. So here we go. The first person winning a pattern for today is, got this down, is it Leela Alexander. The next person winning a pattern for today is Judy Stone. And the third person winning a pattern for today is Madam Ice. And I know your initials were not M.I., and I don't remember if you told me your actual name in your comment. So these 3 people, please be in touch with me, or I'll be in touch with you in some way, shape, or form, and let me know what pattern you would like. Okay. So, so much stuff. So I actually do have a few other things on my list. I don't think it would be so long, but just some things to share with you. Now that I finished my gossamer lace, and I was saying how I'm a one project at a time kind of person, you might be thinking, all right, Arlene, what are you stitching on next? I made reference to the fact that I do want to get moving into getting a small canvas work design worked on. But, I need to have a certain part done before it can become a night stitching, just no-brainer, just do it kind of piece. I have to already figure out what I'm going to do. So in between, I haven't showed you this in a while. So this is one of my patterns that I put out, I guess, last spring, called Color Thesaurus. And it's been something I have taken with me. I had it at the Flosstube retreat. That's where I actually really started working on it. And I joked at how little got done. I brought it to StitchCon, how little got done. I've worked on it at monthly stitch gatherings, which are more talking than stitching. I've taken it with me on a couple of trips with very little stitching getting done. So I haven't even made it out of the purples yet. But it's a good no-brainer kind of project just to have. So this is actually a good filler project for a few days as I am just trying to work through planning some things, and as I'm planning out what models of what I'm going to stitch next. I will just have this handy. It will take me a while to get through all of the colors. There is no doubt about that. But because I haven't shown this to you in a while, it was worth showing it to you now. If you are really observant, or if you own this pattern, you might notice I've made a few changes. Like if you look where it says purple, lavender, violet there, and if you look on here, it says purple, violet, lavender. I switched where lavender and violet was. And that was because I felt like the thread colors were, the color I picked out for violet was too close to, or I wanted the lighter color to be in the middle. That's what it was, just to help balance it. And I realized that as I go through stitching, there's going to be other changes. I know I definitely changed, the whole mauve, whatever. What color is mauve? Mauve. What color is it? The color that I have listed in this pattern, I started to put in. I didn't like it. I took it out. I know what color I'm going to use. I obviously haven't stitched it yet. There will be changes as I go through it. And yes, eventually I'll have to, I will redo what I end up using as a model will eventually get put in. But that's okay. So this will be a project that I have on hand to fill in on the nights when I'm in between as I'm trying to figure out new models, new stitching, new patterns, and so on. Just a quick important thank you without trying to revisit too much of the hard weeks of December. There were lots of cards, holiday cards that came in that I vaguely thought but knew I wasn't too serious about trying to get holiday cards out. I do have a plan of a little bit of pay it forward. I thank so many in this community who've been sharing cards, and I think so many Flosstubers have been saying the same thing, how much it's been a spirit of the community. For me, it's meant that much more. How much you all have supported me in a very rough year. I do need to highlight one in particular, our sweet Marlene, Stitching by the Lake. Not only did she send a sweet card, but when I got back here from being away, from being up in Connecticut for a week and a half doing some hard things, one of the things that I found in my pile of mail was a beautiful Marlene bag, not just a bag, but a matching accessory bag to go with it, and to include lace as a part of it. And one of the things that is in the works, in the plans, will be going in this bag. Thank you, Marlene. It means a lot to me. So I just needed to publicly thank her for that. But to everybody. And like I said, I have a plan of something I'm going to get into the works. I didn't have the time to go back and watch my own last Flosstube, but I don't think I mentioned this in my last Flosstube, but either I did or I didn't. You'll tell me. But I wanted to share that in the most recent issue of X-Stitch magazine, there is a Works by ABC pattern. So it's the issue that is digital only, and it's the mixtape issue. I'll put a link below to the X-Stitch magazine website, so you could get it there. And I've called the pattern Egyptian Mixtape. And take a quick look at that there. That's what you see in the magazine. And what was the inspiration for that pattern? Good old Owen Jones' Grammar of Ornament. So this has been with me through my designing work. It will continue to be with me. It's often a source that I go to. The pages that are the Egyptian ornaments, Egyptian. If you look at these squares on these few pages, the color themes, the color palette, these squares, the way it's laid out, that was my inspiration for what I did for that pattern. And I wrote a little bit about that there on the facing page to where, that's a heavy book, the facing page to where this shows up in the magazine. There's a little bit, there we go. There's a little bit of a write-up of information about what's the inspiration of the pattern. So, and I know there's someone on Instagram, and I meant to look her up, who started stitching it because she tagged me. Thank you, Works by ABC tag. It uses six or seven? Six colors of DMC. I'm sorry, I'm not remembering who it is on Instagram who's stitching it. So I just wanted to make sure to share that news with you, that you can find one of my patterns in X-Stitch magazine, the mixtape issue that is digital, that you can get from the website. Also wanted to share with you, this is all Works by ABC News, and it's wonderful and it's great, and I am so appreciative of it. There is a store in Pennsylvania, and I meant to look up what town it is in Pennsylvania, called the Strawberry Sampler cross-stitch store. I've been there a few times when, basically when I've been going to or from Winterthur. Winterthur is in Delaware, but it's like if you were to look on a map, Delaware, Pennsylvania, New Jersey kind of all come together in a certain area, and so it's sort of right. It's not, maybe it's 20 minutes away from Winterthur, where the Strawberry Sampler is. They have a great newsletter. You can go to their website, sign up to get it, and it shows up in your mailbox. And what I like about their newsletter is it's very chatty. They won't just show you pictures of new designs. There's always like commentary about the new designs. Well, the newsletter they put out on January 7th, and sometimes the newsletters are so large they send them as 2 files. It is not the most current newsletter, so if you go to their website and just click on newsletter, that's where you see the most current one, and the most current one is already a different one. So I don't know if there's a way on their website for you to see the older ones. You just have to like get it emailed to you, I think. Anyway, so I get their newsletters, and depending, I might scroll through it or whatever, but January 7th, boom, there's a Works by ABC. Scrolling, scrolling, scrolling. There's Works by ABC. More pictures. Works by ABC. Works by ABC. I was like, this is, through Hoffman. They were clearly purchasing my patterns. Works by ABC. And again, they write these blurbs. And so here, for example, what they wrote about flowers from 1650. Another design culled from a very old pattern. To quote the designer, it's as fresh and delightful as it was 360 years ago. Or what they wrote about birds and the bees of 1557. These 3 borders are taken from a pattern book for 1557. They're most probably used to decorate tapestries or to decorate clothing borders. It really does blow my mind that we are still doing something that was printed over 450 years ago. There are not a ton of colors here, so you could definitely adapt them to your preferences. I mean, they write about these things. It's wonderful. And so that particular week, okay, and then again, that was the end of one newsletter. So going into the next one, part 2, they're showing the patterns that they purchased, I'm assuming mostly, if not completely, through Hoffman. And these are all the current new ones they're new to them. But unless this is a new, this is still, okay, here we go. There's some more of mine. Here's some more of mine. There's some more of mine. It was pretty cool. So, and I wrote to them and I thanked them for the lot of not airtime, what would you call it? A lot of space that they gave me to their newsletter. And they were very kind and sweet. And actually what I want to do is email them a picture of the final version of the black work because of the gossamer lace, because they were mentioned that particularly in here. So the Strawberry Sampler, I'll give them a nice shout out. They're a nice store, lots of patterns in there that I can remember from my couple of trips there. Well worth looking them up online. Last thing that's on my list for today, I have benefited from times that Flosstubers have shared book recommendations. And I realize I've never, other than like needlework related books, I haven't like offered my own, contributions in that area. And so it's one of the things in 2019 I might try to do. There are times that I'm reading books and I'm thinking, oh, no one else is going to be interested in this. Or, what I'm interested in is not the typical popular books. And then I come to realize, if all you care about is top popular books, you could go to the New York Times bestseller list or the whatever bestseller list. I think Flosstubers just really appreciate hearing what other people like. So I recently finished a book that I just wanted to share with all of you. You all know my love of libraries. And at some point in the late fall, I can't trace it out, but I think in retrospect, it must have been on some lists of, best books of 2018, or I saw it somewhere. You'll understand why whatever brief description I saw appealed to me. What do? I go to my library and, get ready to put a hold on it. It doesn't, I don't buy books like that. I get them from the library. And when I went to the library website, so again, this is a whole library system with multiple branches, and I was surprised to see they had something like 18 or 20 copies of the book. I'm like, whoa, this is a popular book. And then I was like 43rd in line on holds. I don't know if I'd ever had seen numbers like that. Now, again, I don't usually go after like the bestsellers, but it was enough for me to say, wow, this is a pretty popular book. It also made me realize that when my name came up, I had to go get it, or, within the time, I think they give you a week or 5 days or whatever. And I also knew that once I had it in my hands, 3 weeks was going to be it. That was not going to be a book I was going to be able to renew 4 times in a row. What book am I talking about? It is called The Library Book by Susan Orlean. And so probably even from the title, you could see why I was intrigued by it. Nonfiction, so I should start out there. And it is partially, it's the story of the Central Public Library in downtown Los Angeles and a huge fire that happened there in April of 1986. Like huge, gigantic, like never before had there been a fire that caused damage like this at any library. And one of the things in one of the early pages that the author talked about was more or less, how come I'd never heard of this before? And one of the first, what's the first thing you do? You Google it, or whatever equivalent she did when she started her research. What she came to realize is that the fire happened on the same day as the Chernobyl disaster. So if you can imagine, it didn't get much news space. So that was, even learning that little tidbit was really intriguing within the first few pages. The book goes back and forth between the details of the fire, what happened that day, who was where did it start, how did it play out, all of that. And then the immediate aftermath, what was the investigation like, who were the players in that, and what they had to do to kind of try and save as much as they could. There was so much smoke and fire and water damage to so many books. What did they need to do? Ooh, part of that answer, you freeze them. To avoid potential mold damage, you freeze books. They got, I think I'm remembering this correctly, like a frozen food company donated huge like warehouse freezers for thousands and thousands of books. Anyway, so part of the story is that present day 1986 and going forward of the fire and the aftermath of it. Part of the story and the investigation of who was accused and all of that. Part of the story is the history of the Library of Los Angeles. And so it goes back to the late 1800s and traces forward to how did the library come to be what it is. That included a story of how there were women librarians from almost the beginning. That was fascinating. And then part of the book are also chapters about present day, 2018, although she was probably writing it in 2016, 17, 18. Present day central branch of the public library. What goes on there? Who do they serve? So one little criticism is that there was a little bit of jumpiness between the past, the near past, meaning the 1986 and forward, and then the present. So there were a few times I was a little annoyed with the jumpiness, but overall I just found it fascinating. There were so many points where, like I wish in retrospect I was writing down quotes. The author talked about her love of libraries from the beginning of her own life, and she made a good point. The library was one of the first places where she was given independence. That by age 4 or 5, it was one of the first places that she was allowed to be without holding on to her mother's hand. I thought that was, wow, that's so true, isn't it? Isn't it potentially one of the first places that you can be in public without holding onto a parent hand? So and another thing that I wanted to share. So each chapter starts with a few titles from like the card catalog, or you wouldn't say card catalog, you'd say, the listings. And there were actually some books, and some of them were like related to what was coming up in that coming chapter. There were some books that were in those listings that actually then went to the library and like looked up, or as I'm going to show you in one case, looked up in other ways. So in one of the chapters that was more about the history of the library system, one of the listings at the beginning of the, just like how some books will have a quote at the beginning of each chapter. there was a listing for a book called The Library of Tomorrow, a Symposium, 1939. Now, I thought that was intriguing, and I suspected, and I was right, you can't find that book in a library anywhere, but you can find it online. So here it is. I mean, you can, whoop, you are seeing a blank screen. There it is. You can look this up. You can read the whole book online. The Library of Tomorrow, a Symposium, 1939. And what's pretty cool, and this also came across in the book, is the realization that libraries are not just about books. They are about a public space that serves so much more. So 1939, you've got chapters, or I guess these were like talks or speeches or something, that are talking about things like, wait, turn the page. Oh, come on. There we go. There's a section called the library's responsibility to the child, educating the community through the library's part in developing the citizen. These are things they're talking about in 1939. Okay. Anyway, the library book by Susan Orlean, I recommend it if you are interested in libraries. I enjoyed it. I did. Okay. This is longer than I thought it was going to be, folks. I had things to share, chatty-wise, with when it came to my new patterns today. So if you are still with me, thank you for being here. I will just say it again. This community means so much to me, and while I was feeling lots of exhaustion when I started this, and I'll probably be exhausted when I hit the off button, I'm so glad when I get to spend time with all of you, and I thank you for spending time with me. I thank you for all the support and love we give one another, and it all means a great deal. So appreciate you all being here and for caring about one another. Until next time, bye.